Apple just released macOS Tahoe, and it's easily one of the biggest updates ever for the Mac. We have a full redesign, a supercharged spotlight search, control center is finally good, multiple new applications, and more. So in this video, we're deep diving into macOS 26 Tahoe to show you everything new. Okay, so first things first, and you will notice this right away, we have the liquid glass redesign. So if you watched my iOS 26 video, if you have an iPhone, you know that we have the liquid glass redesign there. This is also on macOS. So basically everything has changed. I mean, where do I even begin? All of the app icons at the bottom have changed. We have windows that are more rounded off now, including the Finder windows and the settings windows. You will see everything is just a little bit more rounded off. Pretty much every UI element throughout macOS has been adjusted, including the toggles. So we have a new animation and an overall new look to the toggles, along with the sliders in settings and also in applications, just system-wide. These are all different now with that liquid glass design and animation. The widgets have changed and have a more liquid glass design as well, along with the control center. The control center looks completely different. It's also fully customizable. We'll talk about that in a moment. You'll also see up top, the menu bar is now fully transparent. We don't have any type of, menu bar up there. It's just fully clear. And if you don't see that, by the way, you can go into settings and then into accessibility and then to display and make sure you have this turned off, reduce transparency. If that's turned on, you will still see the menu bar as you could see right there and also in the dock. That's how you could see kind of the difference in liquid glass as well. And also every application now has kind of a floating tab bar or a floating navigation bar. It just looks different and more modern than it did on previous macOS versions. You can see that in Mail and also in Notes up top. Also, the trash can icon at the bottom is new when it's empty, and also when I put some trash in it, you can see it has a different look there as well. If we click on the Apple logo in the top left, we have new glyph icons to the left of all of our options here. And also if we go into About This Mac, you can see right here the glyph icon changes because it corresponds to your specific Mac. So on my MacBook, it shows a MacBook, but here it shows a Mac Studio since that's what I'm using on this device. So it's dynamic. Now, something else that you'll quickly notice in macOS Tahoe is that the launchpad is gone. So down here, there used to be a launchpad that would show all of your applications. Well, that has been removed with something called Apps and Suggestions. There's also a new UI for volume and brightness. So if I go ahead and turn up my volume, you can see it's now up in the upper right-hand corner and the slider looks different. And it also says external headphones right there. And then if I do the same for brightness, you can see it shows the title and we now have that up in the top right instead of smack dab in the middle of the screen, which was very annoying. There's also a new default cursor with more rounded corners than what we've seen on previous macOS versions. And also the hand cursor changes when hovering over a link. It looks different than it did previously. Now, I should also mention what you've probably already been wondering. These icons down at the bottom are dark, and that's because we can now change our app icons. So if you go into your settings and go into appearance, you can see that right here we have icon and widget style, very similar to what we have on iOS and iPadOS. So this is the default right there. You can see everything, these have the gray in the background, which doesn't look great, but dark mode kind of resolves that, looks a little bit better. Now we also have clear icons, very similar once again to what we see on iOS and iPadOS. Then you could also do tinted icons. So if you want to have your icons tinted to match the background or another color, you can do that. Now let's go into the control center because this is where we see a pretty massive difference from previous macOS versions. So first off, we have that liquid glass design. So everything looks more transparent. So you can kind of see the wallpaper in the background, which by the way, if you want this wallpaper, it is part of the Lustra wallpaper collection, which includes a ton of wallpapers for iOS and macOS. It's linked down below. It looks so good on Macs. But anyways, you could see the wallpaper better now through this. Everything is also a little bit more spread out and more circular. Everything's kind of its own independent, section here, which looks really nice. But where it gets really different is if you press on Edit Controls, because now we could actually add new things to the control center, and there's a lot we can choose from. So you can see a shortcut right here. We have our squares or our corners right there. We have a timer that we can add. You have all these different options of things that you could choose to move to the control center. You could just press on the plus right here, or you could drag it. If we go ahead and drag this right here, and you can see that when you press on the plus, you also have the option to add to the menu bar. And that's because you could also drag these up to the menu bar and they will go up there. However, you could actually have folders in the menu bar for control center toggles. So what I mean is you will see this plus now up in the menu bar. If you click on that plus, it will create essentially a group of control center icons that you can put there. This is very reminiscent of iOS. You can see the little icons there for different categories of toggles. Like if I go to music, for example, or home, I can set that and I can add specific things in there. So if I add sound in there, if I add open app in there, just random things, I can add all these into there, and now they're going to be a group up there in my menu bar. So I click on done, and now I go up to the home, I press on that, I get basically a custom control center from pressing this button in the menu bar. It's pretty cool and pretty customizable. And something else that's really cool is that the Controls API has come to macOS Tahoe for third-party app support. So third-party app developers can access this and give you a control center toggle for their app. We also now have live activities on macOS for the very first time. So if your iPhone is nearby, live activities will now appear in the menu bar, and they will kind of animate and move just like you see on iOS. And if you click on that, you will see more information about it. And then if you click on the live activity, if you double click right there, it will open up iPhone mirroring where that was, connected to, where that live activity came from, and then it will show you that application and the current status. Now, there's also a nice change to the lock screen that's also very similar to iOS 26, where we can customize how that lock screen clock looks, the style of it. So if you go into your settings and go to the wallpaper section and then to clock appearance, you will see that you can now change the style of the clock and also the weight of it. You could also choose if you want to show the large clock on lock screen only, or on screensaver and lock screen, or never. So you could choose a different style. So we're just going to go with this first one, and you can just change the weight. If you want it to be skinny or thick, you can do that, and you can see the live preview right there. Now if I go ahead and lock my screen, you can see that is how it looks. You also saw that new animation there when the time changed. And you'll also notice that the screensaver section is now built into the wallpaper tab. Before, screensaver was its own separate menu item. It was kind of redundant, so now Apple has cleaned this up a bit and added screensaver right here as just an option within wallpaper. And also, if you go into the screensaver page, this also has a nice new design where you can change when the screensaver starts, along with when you want to use it and what you want it to go through. If you want it to be light and dark mode, and exactly what you want to be your screensaver. Now you'll also see that we do have some new wallpapers here. So this is the macOS Tahoe wallpaper. This is what it looks like in dark mode. So if I go ahead and switch over to light mode, this is what it looks like in light mode. We're going to go back to dark mode since we are currently in dark mode, but that is a new wallpaper here with macOS Tahoe. And then if we go down, we also have Tahoe Day, which is actually my favorite one. So this is what macOS Tahoe Day, the day version, looks like. And unfortunately, there's no night version of this, although a night version I think would look pretty cool. But we're just going to go back to the Lustra wallpaper pack here. I'm going to choose this color right here. Oh, and by the way, in the wallpaper section, it's much more clear now where you can add your photos and where you can add your albums. Before, it was like this weird section up top that just said add photo and add photo or album. It was separate, but now it has its own section right here. It's much easier to discern where you can add your own photos. Now here's a cool change in macOS Tahoe when it comes to customization. Folders can now change colors, not just that little colored dot that you saw next to it before. So before, if you went in and you added a tag color, it would just add this little dot next to the name, and that was it. That was the end of it. But now it changes the entire folder. But not just that, if you go to customize folder, you could actually add a little glyph icon here, or you could press on emoji and add an emoji to that folder. So now it's much easier to just kind of get a visual understanding of what your folders are. So I actually really like this. This has made me use grid view more than list view now because everything just looks more just visually appealing. You could also now change the default folder color. So before it was always just blue no matter what, but now you can change the default folder color along with you could choose a custom color for it if you don't want one of these presets. If we right click on our desktop, you could see that we now have glyph icons to the left of our options. Before it was just simply text only. There's also now a menu bar section in the settings. So before this was just at the bottom of the control center settings. It was kind of hidden, but now menu bar has its own place here in settings and also has a much better UI now in here. Oh, and here's one of my favorite features in macOS Tahoe. If you scroll down on this section here, we have allow in the menu bar. So what this does is it will manually override everything to get rid of an icon in your menu bar. So if you're like me and you have the Creative Cloud from Adobe and you always see this in your menu bar and it drives you crazy, you cannot get rid of it, well, now you can override everything and just simply toggle this off, and now it will never show up in your menu bar again. And you can do that for any application. That is a big feature here in macOS Tahoe. It's small, but it's something that makes a big difference in quality of life. And another big part of the liquid glass design are the contextual menus that you'll see throughout macOS. So this is in Notes, for example, but you will see this in other areas as well. So once again, it's more rounded off. You can kind of see the refraction of light in the background, so you could tell it's more liquid glass instead of just, blurred. And there's also glyph icons to the left of all of these menu options, or at least most of these menu options. And while we're in the notes, I may as well just mention that you could also capture conversations in the phone app or FaceTime as audio recordings with transcriptions. And of course, you can also export these notes as Markdown, and you could also import as Markdown as well. So if I go up here, you could see import Markdown, and we could also export as Markdown. And once again, look at the options in the menu bar right here. We have those glyph icons to the left. We did not have that on previous macOS versions. All right, so I think it's about time we talk about the biggest upgrade ever for Spotlight Search on the Mac. So first off, if we go ahead and press on Command Spacebar to bring up Spotlight Search, you will see a difference instantly, and that is that we now have these options to the right. So we have Applications, we have Files, we have Actions, and we have Clipboard. So all of those are separate parts of Spotlight. And you can see that we also have keyboard shortcuts to get into those. If I press Command 1, it will automatically go into Applications and show me everything in Applications. And if I want to go back, I could just go over right here where it shows the A, and we have a back button we can press on that. So let's not get ahead of ourselves. Let's just search for something at random. So I'm just going to search for iOS 26, for example, and you will notice that our results now are going to be way better than before, because macOS Tahoe uses machine learning to intelligently rank the results based on how relevant they are to you in that current moment. And you could also now get answers from Siri or ChatGPT in Spotlight Search. Also, Spotlight can find and launch iPhone applications via iPhone mirroring. So if you go into Applications, again, you could click on it, or I could just press Command 1 as the shortcut, and you can see that by default, it shows all your Mac applications. But if you click on these three dots right here, you can change it from a grid view to a list view. You could also show iPhone apps. So now we'll show all your iPhone applications, and you can search for those as well. It does get kind of cluttered though, so I like it to be just Mac applications personally. But you can see here, you could also break it down by the type of application. So if you only want to look for creativity applications, you could press that, and there you go, it shows those. And then the next time you load up Spotlight Search, it remembers where you were, so it will keep that same section. And the whole layout here is just so much better than what we had with Launchpad. Like, I know a lot of people are going to miss Launchpad, but I personally think this just looks much better. It's a little bit more sophisticated. It's not as simple, so it may take some time to get used to, but I actually prefer this over the Launchpad. But still kind of sad to see it go because I've been so used to it, but that is where we're at. Now, if we go back, let's go over to the next one, which is Files. This gets really cool as well. So we'll press Command 2. Again, you can also click on that. Again, right here, you can search for files, but you also have different categories that are preset right here that you can just press on to go to that category. So if I go to QuickTime Player, for example, it's only going to show me QuickTime movies. And once again, the results are not only going to be quicker, but they're going to be more accurate and relevant to what you're actually looking for. But let's go back because it gets even better. We also have actions. So this is where it gets really interesting. So basically, actions are going to be able to perform system and app actions straight from the Spotlight Search. So basically, and it gives you some suggestions right here as well. So like add reminder. So I already have this set up. When I press REM and then I press return, it automatically knows to go ahead and I can type in what I want my reminder to be, and then I can set up the date and everything like that. But all I have to do is type in REM and then return, and it knows what to do. That's like a keyboard shortcut I have set up for that. And you'll see that it's actually right here. So you can see under your suggestions, you can actually type in right here what you want that keyboard shortcut to be, so that when you type it in to the Spotlight Search, it will trigger that action. So for example, if I want to send message, I could just say, MSG. Maybe that's what I want for sending a message. So now that I have that set right there, I press MSG right here, it's going to know that I want to send message once I press return. And there we go. It already has me set up to send a message to a specific person. And you could also customize this as well. So if I go ahead and double click on that, I can choose like what I want to say and who I want it to go to. And there are a lot of these. So you can see calculator, calendar, ChatGPT, clock. It goes down quite a ways. And you could also do really interesting things as well with system settings. So you have system settings in here, you have terminal, voice memos, weather. There's a lot you could do in here. And you could always add a quick key to make it easier. So you could just press in like 2 or 3, characters in there, press return, and then you're on your way. And easily one of my favorite ones is adding reminders, but also calendar events. So I actually have it just so I type in event and then I press on return. And this allows me to quickly be able to go ahead and add an event to my calendar without actually having to open up the calendar calendar and do anything. So I use this pretty much every single day on my Mac. So this is a useful one. I would highly recommend going ahead and setting up. But let's go back because there's something else that I think you're going to love, and that is the final option over here, which is Clipboard. So if you click on Clipboard, what this is it gives you your clipboard history. So yes, we finally have a clipboard manager built in to macOS. Now, it may not be as feature rich and it may not be as good as some of the third-party options, but we now have a built-in clipboard and it shows you your previous clippings right here. It shows when it was copied and it will show you the time as well. You could press right here to copy it again. You could also right click on that to either copy, paste, share, delete item, or open in browser if it's a link. And the cool thing about the clipboard manager is that it's sensitive to passwords and personal information. So if it detects that you're copying something personal or private, it will not save that to your clipboard here. Now also, if you tap on the three dots right here, you have the option to clear history, and then we also have settings for the clipboard manager itself and for Spotlight. So if you go into the settings for Spotlight, this is where you have your different options. You have show related content. And if you scroll down, you have your results from apps. And then all the way down here at the bottom is where we have the clipboard related toggle. And that is simply clipboard search. And it does make sure to remind you that items saved to your clipboard are only saved for 8 hours. And that's why I said that third-party clipboard managers might be better if you want to have something more long-term and saved in there, like, license keys and things like that. But for short-term, I think this is pretty cool to have, and it's good that it's native now in macOS Tahoe. And by the way, Spotlight in general in macOS Tahoe is contextually aware, like I mentioned earlier. So it's just going to understand the application you're working in. It's going to understand what text you're copying. It's just so much smarter now to give you more relevant information, and also, again, to not, put in any personal information into your clipboard history. Now, there's also a new pop-up when applications were force quit. So it shows this right here. It says apps in the background retain access to sensors or personal data. Now, heading into the shortcuts application, we have a whole new redesign here, the liquid glass design. Everything looks better, especially the little menu section over here to the left, where we also have the option to add a new folder. That was not there before. We only had the hide sidebar on the far left. And we have a new section here called automation, because this is the big change with macOS Tahoe, are shortcut automations. These can actually be more useful than iOS automation. So when you click on the plus right there, you get your different automations. So you have your basic time of day, alarm, email, but the interesting ones to me are right here. You have folder, file, and external drive. So basically, these automations will be triggered based on, certain files. So when a file is modified, you could set an action to happen. When an external drive is connected, you could set a certain automation to happen. So if I go to file, for example, we go to next, you can have this run immediately. And let's choose the file. So we'll choose this folder right here, our test folder, and we'll go ahead and choose this specific file right there. So then we'll go to next, and now you can choose, what you want to happen when something gets modified with that file. And from here, you get the option to select a pre-existing shortcut, or you could create a new shortcut straight from here. So I'll create a new one, and I'll just do show alert. So I'll bring this in here and I'll say important file was modified. Now, of course, you can have this send you an email, add it to your calendar, add it to your Slack, something like that. But I'm just going to do something simple here. So now, we could press on play, and that's what it will look like when something is modified. So let's test it out. You can see it shows that automation right there. So if we go ahead and modify this, so I'm just going to change the name. So I'm just going to take out the O and then press return, and you will see that we should get an alert now that happens automatically. There we go. So I don't even need the shortcuts app to be open. It was just open right there, but that's what it will show. So let me try it without it open so you can see it right here. So we'll just add another one of these, and then it should show us an alert. There we go. So it runs our automation quickly when a file is modified. And once again, that was a very simple one, but you can get a lot more sophisticated when you have changes to files. When you connect an external drive, you can get creative with these, and they can be very useful. You also have when a display connects or when Stage Manager is turned on. So definitely worth looking into if you're into building out automations. And by the way, if we create a new shortcut, we now have new Apple Intelligence actions. So you can see it's actually over here by default. It says Apple Intelligence, and we have all of our different ones right here. So we have use model, which we saw on iOS as well. You could choose between the private cloud compute, PCC, on-device, or ChatGPT models. You also have create image with image playground. You could add that as an action. And then we also have our writing tools. So you can adjust the tone, proofread, rewrite, and so on. All of those can now be added to shortcuts. Now heading into Safari, we do have some minor changes here. Not a lot has changed, but we do have that liquid glass design up top. You could see that the toolbar looks different. Also, the top bar just kind of adjusts color based on the website's main color, or at least the header color. Like for example, if I go somewhere that has a really bright color, like maybe New York Post, there we go. You can see that it turns really red up there up top to match that aesthetic. And if I switch to Apple, it will switch it back to that black color. So it's more adaptive to the color of the website's header section. And if you open up multiple tabs, the tab view is new, so everything is more circular. We have a little bit more space in between each tab now. It doesn't look as flat as it did previously. However, we can no longer change the tab layout. So I know some people liked to change the tab layout in the past. You can no longer do that with macOS Tahoe. But if you do right click on this, you can see the glyph icons now appear to the left. The sidebar also has a new look. So you can see our open tabs right here, along with our saved section down here, like shared with you. This will also show the iCloud tabs and everything like that. Picture in picture is now easier to move. It's easier to go onto like your desktop, for example, and you could also choose next and back. There's also now the option for some videos to skip ads from picture in picture. So I have premium on YouTube, but there is a way to skip ads now straight from the picture in picture view. Now here's a great quality of life change in macOS Tahoe. Third-party browsers can now pre-fill two-factor authentication codes that are sent over text to your Mac. So if you use Chrome, if you use Opera, a browser like that, you can now get those 2FA codes sent over and pre-filled. Also now developers can package extensions without using a Mac or Xcode thanks to the web extension packager. And if we take a look at the release notes for Safari 26.0, we do see some additional features mentioned here. So we now have a section for web apps that says added support for any website to become a web app on iOS or iPadOS. We now finally have support for HDR images on macOS Tahoe. And here's a good one for some websites. So we now have support for SVG icons in the Safari browser. One of the biggest bugs I had on the previous macOS version has been resolved. So it says fixed picture in picture to exit when the video element is removed. That's been resolved. And there's also a new feature for reporting a website compatibility issue within Safari. And the passwords application, which I don't know about you, but I use passwords more on Mac than I do on iOS. So in the passwords app, we can now view the password history. So if you've changed the password a time or two, you can now click on view history and you can see what the password was changed to over time. Also in macOS Tahoe, we have some AI features such as live translation. So we now have auto translate in messages, phone, and FaceTime. So just like on iOS, we have that on macOS. And if we're in the messages application, for example, we go to the emoji picker right here, and then we go over to this where we can choose the Genmoji. If we click on Genmoji, we now have some suggestions down at the bottom for Mixmoji. So you can see it shows Genmoji, mix and match. So if we go ahead and go to continue and we choose a couple of emojis, it will combine those and create a custom emoji that we can use in the chat. So there we go. That's what it came up with. And if I go ahead and click on that and go to add, it will now add that to the chat as an emoji. And also if you're modifying a person with your Genmoji, you can now customize that a little bit more because now you can add expressions for people. You can change the hair, you can change the facial hair. You have more options now for Genmoji when you're using people. Now let's go back to that phone application because yes, we finally have a native phone application on macOS. We didn't have that before. So this is great to make and take phone calls, and everything is also synced with your iPhone. So it's really easy to pick up where you left off on your Mac. Now you do also have pretty much all the features that you have on an iPhone as well. So you have call screening, you have hold assist, you have the live translation, you have contact posters that appear when you're taking a call, and also in line right here, you have your favorites. Everything is just like it is on the iPhone, which is really nice to be able to take calls on your Mac now with a native application. And we do also have that FaceTime revamp as well, where you have the new design, we have the unknown callers list, and you also have a more option. But I think the app I'm more excited about coming to macOS is the Journal application. So Journal finally makes its debut on the Mac with macOS Tahoe. And this is great because just like on iOS, you do have separate journal like sections. So if you don't want to have everything combined into one, you can have a different almost folder, a separate journal, I would say. So like if you have a personal and maybe a work, and then maybe like something with friends, you can separate that so that all your journal entries are sectioned off and not all just combined together. You have all your stats right here under Insights. You have your places. So now everything will show show where you've journaled on a map. And if you go into one of these, you can also mark up now. So you can see you could add location, but we do also have the ability to mark up now with iOS 26 and macOS 26. The Freeform application gets that new liquid glass redesign. We also have the updates to Image Playground and writing tools, and you also now have recently added. The Home application gets the adaptive temperature feature where you can set your thermostat to auto adjust the temperature based on when you're home and when you're away. And the Reminders application, we have a new Apple Intelligence feature. So if we go up to File, we now have the option to auto categorize. So when we do that, it's going to run, it's going to do its thing, and it's going to auto categorize everything we have listed in here. So you can see it categorized it by electronics, food and beverage, personal care, and so on. And now we have the Apple Intelligence logo right there. When we click on that, you can turn off auto categorization if you want. And then when you press turn off, you can either keep or remove the sections that it created. Also, Apple Intelligence can now suggest tasks, grocery items, and follow-ups based on emails or other text on your device. That's the same thing we have on iOS that also works on macOS. We also have some updates to the preview application. So now when you have a PDF or anything loaded up right here and you right click on it, we now have a new glyph icon next to open with preview. That did not have that before. Actually, none of these had glyph icons before. And in the actual preview application, you can see that the toolbar now always shows up top, and it also looks a lot cleaner thanks to liquid glass. And then if we go up to view right here, we have a new option for use dark appearance for PDF. So now if I go ahead and click that, it will turn this into dark mode. And of course, we have all the changes that you see on iOS as well. I won't go too deep into this, but you can see the redesign for the TV application. We have the redesign for the podcast application along with the custom settings that you can set. We have the redesign for the photos application. Looks much better than it did before. We also have the change to music where you have where you can pin your music up here. You can pin your different, albums or playlists. Also, you can have folders for playlists. And of course, we do have auto mix, the new auto mix feature for transitioning songs into each other. And then for the clock app, if you're somebody who uses an alarm on your clock and you go ahead to create it, you can set a custom snooze duration just like you can on iOS 26. There's also some new gaming features with macOS Tahoe. So first off, we do have the new games application, just like on iOS and iPadOS, where you have the hub, you have everything in one section. So you have your home, your arcade, your friends, your library, everything right there. Also, now when you load a game and you start playing a game in macOS Tahoe, you will go into low power mode automatically. And here's one that's really cool. So Apple says that with macOS Tahoe, games will now install faster from the Mac App Store. So now when you buy, or if you just download a free game, it will install to your drive and be done faster than before. And then also games will now look smoother thanks to a Metal FX update that was included in macOS Tahoe. So games should download faster, install faster, and also run faster and smoother. Now here's a really useful new application in macOS Tahoe. We now have a magnifier application. So at first you might think, why would I need a magnifier on my Mac? Well, this could actually be really useful for situations like a college when you're in a class and you're maybe sitting and you need to, view the board that you're far away from and see what's actually on the screen so you can write it down in your notes. That's what Apple actually advertises for. You can see that liquid glass toggle right there, the slider. But this is really cool because you can also use your iPhone as the source. Of course, it doesn't look good right now because I'm not using my iPhone. It's actually just facing me, which is kind of redundant, but you can have this set to use your iPhone as a camera. So if you go up here to camera, you could choose one of your different cameras from the options up there. Then you have all these settings over here like straighten. So if you want to straighten photos that were taken. So of course, when you zoom in, you can also take a photo from this application as you are zoomed in. And then if we head into our settings, there are some other small changes I wanted to mention. So if you go into the settings and then into appearance right here, we have a couple of small changes. So first off, auto now shows up first. Before it was light, dark, and then auto, but now auto is at the front. Also, the icon and widget style section has been moved into here. And also the glyphs now show what icons will look like. And if we go to our desktop and dock settings right here, you can see that we have window title bar double click action. Before that said double click a Windows title bar too. So this wording has been changed. And for the action, it now says no action, whereas before it just said do nothing. Down at the desktop and stage manager section, it now says show desktop right here. Before it said click wallpaper to reveal desktop. And then also it says always on wallpaper click or only in stage manager on click. Before it just said always or only in Stage Manager. You can now screen record in HDR, so it's not just limited to SDR anymore. If you go into the privacy and security section, we now have a standalone section for blocked contacts. So all your blocked contacts will now show up in one section. There's also parental control enhancements across communication limits, communication safety, and the App Store. Terminal gets new themes, new fonts, and support for Powerline glyphs. Also, if you go up to Shell up here in the menu bar with it opened, we now have an X glyph next to close window, and then next to edit, or underneath of edit, we have a couple of glyph icons here, including this new glyph next to show colors. And if we go into our terminal settings and then go to profiles right here, this is where we can change our different text and our different colors along with our different themes. And the new themes here are clear dark and clear light. So both of these are new with macOS Tahoe, and you can see the selections here for that. Also, when you go to the font and you go to change, this interface looks so much better than it did previously. It's much easier to see what the actual characters will look like, and it's easier to choose between them, along with changing the character spacing and the line spacing. It was just so clunky before. And then we also have some nice accessibility features as well. So most of these are already on iOS, so I'll just be quick with these because I did already cover them. But something new here as far as accessibility goes, of course, we did talk about the Magnifier application, which is nice, but we also have vehicle motion cues for the first time on Mac. So this is going to help you reduce motion sickness when you're in a moving vehicle. So this can be great if you're maybe in the car on your MacBook or even on a plane in a MacBook. This could help. We also have a system-wide reader mode. So if you go into your accessibility and then go into read and speak, we have accessibility reader right here, which will give you a reader view for everything, not just Safari. So I'll go into Safari just for this example, but if we go right here and we use the keyboard shortcut Command Escape, that will open up the accessibility reader. As you can see right there, it opens it up and it will show you everything here. So it'll show you the suggestions. So I'll go to this one. Okay, so I actually ended up using my Notion document that I have over to the side, but it actually has a accessibility reader view for my Notion document, which is pretty cool. And so from there, you have the option to change some things. So if you tap on the A's over here, you could change the font, the spacing. You really have a lot of customization options for this. You could also have it read out what you want as well and change the playback speed of it reading out that document. There's also an all new interface for Braille displays with macOS Tahoe. So if you do use Braille, you'll see an update there. You can also now use accessibility settings when screen sharing. So if you use something like VoiceOver, for example, you'll now be able to use that while screen sharing. And then in the App Store, if the developer supports it, you will see accessibility nutrition labels. Just like we see with privacy labels, you will see those for accessibility now if they are enabled, which right here you could see most people have not updated their apps yet to support that, but they should in due time, and it will show you which accessibility features work with that application. So that is macOS 26 Tahoe, a massive update for the Mac, especially when it comes to Spotlight search and the overall liquid glass redesigns. Hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, give it a thumbs up. If you want to get access to this wallpaper and many others, there are like 90 wallpapers for iOS and for macOS. That is called Lustra. It's linked down in the description below if you want to help support the channel. But anyways, hope you guys enjoy this video. Let me know what your favorite feature is in macOS Tahoe. I'm really curious to see, aside from liquid glass. Don't say liquid glass. Say something different and original. But anyways, thanks for watching, guys, and I will see you soon.